Well, let's get back to our conversation about Social Security and how to help you keep more of it instead of sending it to the IRS. Now, remember, evasion is illegal. Avoidance is encouraged. It's going to be a theme. It's a mantra. Say it like a mantra if you have to. Because to be honest with you, a lot of people feel like if they're not paying their fair share or what they paid before, then they're somehow cheating the system. I will tell you that there have been many public officials, to include Supreme Court judges and Congress people, that have publicly stated that your responsibility as a taxpayer is to monitor your tax situation and maximize that, meaning minimize what you send to the IRS legally. They write the book, we play by it, and we'll help you get there. Okay, now, what we want to do, to the extent that we're able, is to help you keep those thresholds below the taxation levels for Social Security. Now, every time we teach a class, we go in public, we talk to a group of people, even just one or two people, there's always somebody in the room that says, well, do you really expect us to live on less than $32,000, my wife and I to live on less than $32,000 a year? And the answer is no, of course not. However, the answer is to keep that taxable and combined income below $32,000 if you're able. And there are ways to do that, and we will get to those. Now, the tax-advantaged investments, they don't count as combined income. These are your 401k or your Roth 401ks, your Roth IRAs. Anything that says Roth is tax advantage or tax preferred. Roth conversions, we've spoken a little bit about that. We'll talk a lot more about that. And then some forms of cash value life insurance and fixed indexed annuities. I say some forms because as soon as I say life insurance and fixed indexed annuity or annuity of any kind, there's a percentage of people who, A, it's rolling over in their grave because they got something back in the 80s that just didn't work for them. And two, they've told their nephew about it, so now their nephew, every time they hear the word annuity, is thinking, oh my God, I'm never going to get one of those. And I'm here to do some updating. Let me just say it that way. So, and I say some forms of cash value life insurance because not all cash value life insurance is really good enough for us to offer it to you. What we will talk about and we will offer to you if the conversation comes up and you're eligible for it, they're very powerful, extremely powerful. And if you are eligible and it makes sense for you, it's suitable, then we will offer it. But we won't offer anything that doesn't 100% work and do exactly what it says it's going to do. And we've tested these. So we'll move on now. I'll just say it that way. So the single biggest contributor to Social Security taxation, and I'm pausing here because I want you to think about what you think it might be, and you can shoot us an email, let us know what you think, but you're going to find out in a second anyway, is having too much money in your tax-deferred accounts, period. So how do we help you do that differently and better? We reposition those assets for you in several different ways. Repositioning, it looks like sometimes it's a Roth conversion, sometimes we fund a cash value life insurance plan with it, sometimes we put it into a fixed indexed annuity and then Roth convert it within there. Now, some of this also depends on what your level of risk tolerance is. If you're a very risky person and you want all your money in the market, okay. I mean, it's probably not what we're going to actually, I can tell you it's not what we're going to recommend. And we would probably set up an account for you if you like, but we wouldn't take on the responsibility of your entire portfolio that way. So just, and besides, you don't want to have all your eggs in one basket. Now, pensions. Let's talk about pensions for a minute. For those of you who are fortunate enough to continue to have a pension and or will have a pension from the job that you're at, when you leave that job, if you have, and this is for people who have pensions, this is a common occurrence. You have a pension, and then you have an IRA, and then you have a 401k, and then you're going to have Social Security. And if you've been paying attention to what we've been saying, all those things are tax, 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 and tax, correct? Okay. Now, if you have a pension and you can take a lump sum distribution when you leave that employer, then we can take that pension and we can move that into an account, oftentimes a fixed index annuity because it's safe, and we can do Roth conversions within it and figure out a way to actually help them cover the cost for you, which is also powerful. Now, we can take that chunk and move that over here and make that tax preferred or tax free so that this Social Security doesn't get taxed as much. And then along the way, we can potentially help you move some of these into your Roth IRA so that that tax bill goes lower and lower and lower, and potentially and essentially cause that Social Security taxation to just go away. That's the goal. That's the plan, and that's what we do all the time. Now, like I said, the next best part of that is helping get other people to pay for it, which we're going to get more into. So we have everybody look to see if that's a possibility, okay? Now, if it is, then we'll work that strategy to the extent that we're able, and we'll get you as tax-free as possible. Now, the rule of thumb for tax-deferred investing for us, we recommend this to everybody. If your employer is going to match your 401k, then contribute up to the match, because you have 100% gain immediately. You may have a vesting schedule, and probably do. You're going to have to work there and wait for so long for all of it to be what they call vested, so you get all of it when you leave. But that's worth it. I mean, as long as it's worth it to stay at the job, that is, right? So contribute up to the match, and then move on. Well, what do we mean when we say move on? Well, if it makes more sense for us to set up an IRA for you, then it does, because we'll probably make you more income in that IRA than your employer will with the system they've got their 401k set up for. Some of them are better than others, and I'm not knocking them. It's just that we can probably grow it faster than they will for you. So there's one option. Now, when we talk about your tax deferred accounts, and this is the kind of the, I will say this is one of the most important concepts to get throughout this presentation and any other retirement planning presentation. In fact, if you haven't talked to your financial advisor about this, we encourage you to. Now, you want your tax deferred RMDs when you have to take them, and you may have to do some spreadsheet work on this to do some projections. You want to look at what the balance is likely to be given the rate of growth for a certain number of years, and run the standard deduction up next to it, because that also indexes for inflation. And these are just things we do every day. And then figure out, when you get there, when you have to take the required minimum distribution out of all those accounts, what's that number likely to be? Now, take that number and then compare that with your Social Security, add that to it, see if it's going to be taxable based on that, and then see what your standard deduction is. If your standard deduction is high enough to cover both of those, and or you don't have Social Security taxation, even better, then basically that standard deduction offsets your tax bill. So the IRS pays that tax bill for you in a way. Hopefully that makes sense. A lot of times it takes one or two times to run through that. So go ahead and run through that a couple of times. You want your taxable income when you're at RMD age with Social Security income, the taxable part, if there is any. Actually, you want that, ideally you want that to be zero. But if it can't, it can't. You want those two to add up to a little bit less than your standard deduction and what that's likely to be at the time. And if you do that, then that will offset your tax bill. So that's one way we get other people to pay the bill for you. If we can get your business partner, the IRS, to pay a bill for you, I don't see how you can't call that a win. I mean, that just makes me smile thinking about it. Now, let's go through a quick example. If you retire at 73 today, your standard deduction is $30,000. Actually, I think it's 29.2. No, that was last year. It's $30,000 now. So how much can you have in your IRA so your RMDs are tax-free? Well, if you have to pull 3.77% out and your balance is about 500,000, then your RMDs are about 18,850 or 18.9. That's less than your 30,000, meaning that your RMDs would be tax-free, meaning they'd be covered or offset by your standard deduction. Now, that's not including the part of Social Security that could be taxed, so we want to make sure that we leave some room between here and here in case A, part of your Social Security gets taxed, or two, the IRS changes a rule or Congress changes a rule and now somehow something that wasn't taxable before becomes taxable, and this number would go up. So we want to make sure we have some room in between here and here. So as a guideline, what we look at is how much you should have in there as a joint filer when you're 73, and that number we look at is about 500,000. Now, what does that mean for you, especially if you have $1.5 million in there? Well, it means you better get busy doing some Roth conversions. That's what it means. That's the bottom line, really. Unless you don't care about paying the taxes, and some people don't, but not many people that I know do. Now, the ideal balance to have in a tax-deferred bucket in a rising tax rate environment is, yeah, you guessed it, like we discussed, just enough so that plus your Social Security tax or taxable income is lower than your standard deduction, so that it's offset. Now, let's talk about the tax advantage or tax preferred bucket. Some people call it tax free, and if you do it right, it gets to be that way, and that's the goal, right? Now, some investments are sold as truly tax free, and they're not quite, because when we look at it, when to be truly tax free, it has to be free from all taxation and not trigger Social Security taxation. That's a very important part that some of these will leave out. Because, say, for example, muni bonds and oil and gas investments, a lot of them are free from some taxes, but not others. Some have capital gains tax attached if you make a gain, and then others they go on that combined income list, so they'll cause your Social Security to be taxed, and that's not acceptable. I mean, that makes them not truly tax-free. We'll say it that way. So they have their place, they do, and we're not knocking them as investments. They're just not completely tax-free, and those are the things that we want to work with because we want you truly tax-free. Now, excuse me, some examples of tax-advantaged investments. Like I said, anything that says Roth, and some properly structured cash value life insurance policies, and fixed index annuity plans. We talked a bit about that, so I'm not going to kick that horse, but we will come back to it. Now, Roth IRA. We've talked a little bit about this already, but let's go into a little more detail. The contribution limits for a Roth IRA. If you're not 50 yet, it's $7,000 a year into a Roth IRA. If you're over 50, then you can contribute up to $8,000 a year. Now, when the distributions, when the funds come out, they don't cause Social Security to be taxed. Now, there's a caveat in there. We'll get to it in a second, but whatever you put into the Roth IRA has already been taxed. You pay taxes on it. You can pull it right back out if you want to, anytime, from day one. The gains, to avoid penalties on them, will have to sit there 5 years, and you have to be over 59 and a half. So as long as that happens, then the entire account is truly tax-free and does not trigger Social Security taxation, even more importantly. There are income parameters to making contributions to a Roth IRA, and they look like this. If you're a joint filer, what they call a phase out, which means your ability to contribute up to that $7,000 or $8,000 starts to phase out. And then by the time you get to 246, modified adjusted gross income, then you can't contribute directly to a Roth IRA. And those numbers are $150,000, $165,000 for a single filer. And if you still want to contribute and you make more than these numbers, then you can still do that by doing what we call a backdoor Roth contribution. And it looks something like this. You put that money into a traditional IRA and leave it in cash, and then you Roth convert it from that IRA that traditional IRA into a Roth IRA. And you'll pay taxes along the way in the year that you do that. We have to send the IRS a form so they know we did it. But then it's in the Roth IRA, and it's not direct, but they like to have exceptions for people that like to do things, especially if they make north of $246,000. So we will take advantage of every rule possible, as long as it's legal, of course. Now, the Roth 401k. We talk to a lot of people who are 15, 20 years, 30 years into their career, and they tell us, well, we've been contributing to our traditional 401k this entire time. We have $700,000 in there, and I'm only 50. So what you're saying is I'm going to get, super taxed, and the answer is yes. Now, what you can do is that day or the next day, email HR and say, I would like to contribute to my Roth 401k. The same contribution limits apply, and if your employer is matching, then the employer will continue to match what you put in the Roth 401k, but they'll put that part into your traditional 401k. And that's not a bad thing, because you're still getting the match. Now, these are contribution limits, and you can send 100% of your contribution into your Roth 401k. So typically, for those folks that say, hey, I have a $700,000 in there and I'm only 50, we will have them start making whatever contribution they are into the Roth 401k immediately, so that they're taxed on less than that. They'll still pay tax because they won't get the deduction that they did before, but that's totally acceptable compared to what's coming. It's usually better to pay tax on the seeds than the crop. Just remember that. Now, the big question, the one we get all the time. Should I have an IRA or should I have a Roth IRA? And the answer is that it depends. It depends on what you expect tax rates to do in the future. And it also depends on where you are right now. Are you set up so that you can still take advantage of the tax deductions, or are you way past that and you should be funding a Roth IRA? These are questions that we can help you answer, and we'll be happy to. But the answer is not the same for everybody. But mostly it depends on what you think tax rates are going to do in the future. Now, what is a retirement plan? A retirement plan is just a tax code. So some of you know some of these tax codes: 401k, right? 403b, 457b. Some of you contribute to these. Now, this one, a lot of people are not aware of. Tax code 408, excuse me, which is the individual retirement arrangement. Now, this is what everybody thinks an IRA is. And the word arrangement, most people, when they think of IRA, they think of individual retirement account. But the word is actually arrangement. What does that mean? Well, that means that your business partner, the IRS, it's an arrangement, right? So they can regulate how much you get taxed, what you can do with it, what you can't do with it, and all of these things. Now, keeping that in mind, we work within the rules that they lay out and those regulations. So the reason that I bring that up is because I think it's important for you to know what you're working with, so that you know how to work with it and how to work it as well as you can for you. Because that's the most important part of this. Because you and your family, this is what matters. I mean, the IRS makes plenty of money. Don't tell them I said that, but I'm pretty sure they already know. But you and your family need to make and keep as much of it as humanly possible. I mean, just think about how much the price of a gallon of milk has gone up in the last 4 years. I mean, I don't need to kick that horse either. So let's look at some of these. Now, within these types of accounts, you have market investments, right? Well, you have excuse me, you have different types of investments. One of them is a market investment. And what are some of the characteristics of a market investment? Well, typically, and then you also have guaranteed investments. They typically they have managers like us. We manage. They have higher risk, they're associated with higher returns, well, typically, and they have taxes associated with them. So when we look at those, when we're evaluating what to do with your retirement accounts, we look at those elements and then we say, okay, how much of a mix do you want? How much do you want to have subject to all of that and potentially higher gains? And then how much do you want to have subject to virtually no risk to just a little bit of risk, but not have as much of a gain? And then how do taxes play a role in each? Those are the things that we look at first. So on the guaranteed side, you have your bonds, you have your CDs, savings accounts. A lot of these things we looked at when we looked at the taxable bucket. MIGA, which is a multi-year guaranteed annuity, sort of like a CD, only typically they work a little bit better. We can talk more about that if you want. And they typically pay a little better. No market risk, meaning they have protective floors. Protective floor looks something like this. If you put money into an account that has a protective floor, sort of fixed indexed annuity, multi-year guarantee annuities, cash value life insurance, these have protective floors, which means that the money you put in there is subject to a gain if the market does well. They do that in periods. Let's say it's a 1 year period. So, say you put in $100,000, then you make a gain of 10%. That value goes up to $110,000, and if there's a cost associated with it, that comes out a little bit, but it stays at that level. Now, let's say the market return the next year is minus 38%, like it was back in 2008. That value stays where it is, and then when the market goes up 24% or so, like it did last year, then that value goes up 24%, and it stays there, and it's ratcheting up. So when the market goes down, it stays where it is. When the market goes up, it participates in the gain. That's what a protective account is with a 0% floor. So that's what we mean when we say no market risk. Some have guaranteed returns. Some have guaranteed bonuses, deposit bonuses on the way in, and we'll talk more about that. Returns are typically lower because of the risk, and there are taxes involved depending on the type of account. And like I said, we can take a fixed index annuity and we can defer those taxes out until many years down the road. Actually, almost indefinitely. I'll say almost, but because at some point taxes will come out if they're due. But they can be deferred for many, many years if that's your goal. Now, what happens when we take an account or create an account through a tax code that has the benefits of both of these? Is there such an account? Is it too good to be true? I know the suspense is probably killing you. So there's a rule 7702, which is a tax code, which should go up here, but it doesn't. Actually, it shouldn't go up there, but it does sort of go there because we work it that way. Now, 7702 is a tax code that regulates how life insurance is used as a retirement vehicle. And it doesn't have to be a retirement vehicle, but it's the tax code that governs how life insurance can be used as an investment account. And it can become a retirement vehicle. Higher returns, because they actually do make those. I can attest to that because I have some of my own, and it's doing pretty well over the last 11 years. So that includes, anyway, it's doing pretty well. It doesn't have market risk because it's a protected account as a 0% floor, like we talked about. And if you do it right, and it's easy to do it right, it's not that complicated, what you pull out of there is tax-free, and it stays tax-free. You don't get a 1099, and it does not contribute to Social Security taxation because it does not go on the combined income list. But let me repeat that. It's tax-free when it comes out. You have to do it right, but depending on how much you put into it, which doesn't have the same income or contribution limits that a Roth IRA does, which also makes it even a little more powerful than that. So in addition to your Roth IRA, if you're eligible and it's suitable, then you should have one of these in your portfolio. I won't say many things as a blanket recommendation, but that's one of them. Is this your best option in retirement? By itself, I'm going to say no. Should you have it as a linchpin? Absolutely 100%, if you're eligible and it's suitable. Now, let's rehash that just a little bit. The three basic types of retirement accounts. You have taxable, tax deferred, and tax advantaged. The benefits of each we've already been over, but let's do it again just so it's fresh in your mind. Taxable bucket is good for an emergency fund. You want 3 to 6 months of expenses in there, or income, you pick, whatever makes you feel good and sleep better at night. Now, tax deferred. You want to have just enough in there to where your required minimum distributions coming out and the potentially taxable portion of your Social Security income coming out are lower than your standard deduction, so that your standard deduction offsets that tax. So the IRS pays your bill. And for tax advantaged, everything else. So this goes back to the question, well, do you really expect us to live on $32,000 a year? No, and this is how we get there. By making this true, and we have this off to the side, and if everything else is coming out of here, then you have this tax covered by your standard deduction, and with a little bit of room, we cover the taxes that would come from these accounts also. And then if everything else is coming out of here, you don't have tax on your tax deferred accounts, you don't have tax from your tax advantage accounts, you don't have Social Security being taxed. Now, for some people, this will put you at an effective tax rate of just about 0. Is it possible? Yes. Not for everybody, like we said, but we should talk about this. And when it is, you should. I don't usually should on people, but this is one of those situations I'm going to should on you. You absolutely should do this, because this makes things better for you and your family and future generations. If you want to build some generational wealth, this is how you do it. Okay, well, I think we've already done that part. Yeah, I can skip that. I'm going to take that slide out. Yeah, we've already done that. Okay.